welcome to The List Makers. I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
Our topic on this spin-off from The Doctor Who show is top 5 historical settings that you would like to see. How are you, Rob?
Very well, Dave. Been thinking about this all month and have come up with some, well, I hope they're interesting answers.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see where you go. I need to say that we had several listeners who all sent in a variety of different topics that were all in a similar sort of area. So apologies if you sent one in that sounds a bit like this, but I haven't named you. That's why, because we got multiple variations. I sort of put them into one nice conglomeration. So thank you to all for your ideas. As always, send your topics in. Rob, this was hard for a couple of reasons.
Are we going to talk about them now or at the end?
No, we'll talk about them at the end. We always make our list first, but just a bit of what I think they call in the business foreshadowing, that this was hard.
You have foreshadowed.
And it's now time for you to make your list.
All right. In at number 5, I'm going around 300-ish BC and Alexander the Great. I'm doing my cliched choice here first, and indeed a choice that Doctor Who has already done with Farewell Great Macedon, which was written back in 1964 by a Turkish writer called Morris Fahy, and which eventually became a Big Finish play that some of you out there might have even heard. And unlike so many of the so-called lost stories which have been done on Big Finish, this didn't have to be invented. You know, sometimes these Big Finish stories, someone just had an idea or a title and then they've written the whole thing contemporarily. No, this was actually written back in the day and had all the groundwork done. But putting that aside, I think the ancient era is ripe for adventure, and I'm just an Alexander the Great fanboy, so sue me on this one, Dave. I would do Alexander the Great.
Fantastic.
In at number 4, I've got the 1930s. Think Casablanca, think Indiana Jones. I have a real thing for the 1930s, and I do think it comes from stuff like Indiana Jones originally back when I was a young kid. And then later stuff like Casablanca. I mean, you watch that film and you think, wow, we're in the world of Indiana Jones. It looks like Indiana Jones, but in black and white. You know, they've even got the plane flying across the map and all this sort of stuff. I think that's how well Raiders of the Lost Ark did that era. And I think taking the Doctor and a companion back to it with the look and the glamour and maybe what's happening in Europe at the time, I think you could make something really great, really adventurous, just a wonderful era to set things in.
Nice.
In at number 3, the Renaissance. This might be the understatement of the podcast, Dave, but I think this is an era where a lot was going on.
You could say that.
Yeah, particularly in the sciences, and maybe you could tie something in there that's interesting with medicine, or maybe an invention of some kind and the reactions to it, maybe the way something gets invented ahead of its time, maybe because of the Doctor having a little accident, or maybe the monk is in there messing around and we have to put things right, you know, something along those lines. Just a very fertile area to be in when it comes to ideas and things kicking off and all that. So the Renaissance. In at number 2, I've got the Middle Ages. And although more fantastical takes on knights and castles have popped up in things like Game of Thrones or even Lord of the Rings to some degree, and those takes are very, very popular, I think a more straight take on what could happen in the Middle Ages for our heroes would be a nice thing. And so long as it's not the Master having another crack at buggering up Magna Carta, I think it could be something really quite interesting. I mean, can you imagine it? Can you imagine the location choices in the UK for something like this? Even when they did something like Androids of Tara, which wasn't set on Earth, just these wonderful castles you have access to in the UK. You could do a great Middle Ages story, no problem. And finally, my number 1 choice, Dave, I'm looking at the Australian convict era, which would be pretty much 1788 when people were lobbing here through to the mid-1800s. A bit of a wild card here and maybe a parochial choice, but I'm actually inspired by the recent-ish Disney series Dodger and the way it portrayed Sydney in the convict era. I think it looked really good. And having said that, I don't think they even went all out on location work. I think they were only in like 1 or 2 main locations. They just made the camera angles work. I think if you put even more effort into it, it could look incredible. And yes, it's an era we have seen in some TV and film before, but it's not as often as people might think. And I just think it would be a wonderful backdrop to a story. I'm not entirely sure what you would do, but I think the possibilities are ripe. So that's my number one.
Wow. Rob, last month we had a record 4 snaps.
Oh, what are you going to say?
What do you reckon we've got this time?
Well, it's either going to be 0 or it's going to be 5?
We've got half.
Half. Oh, 2.5.
No, just a half.
Just a half. Oh, I see. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Half a snap, yes.
Okay.
We have many things to talk about. First of all, just quickly, Farewell Great Macedon worth buying?
Yes, I think so.
I should check that one out. I keep thinking it sounds interesting, so yes, that's a good reminder to check it out. But it's time for me to make my list.
Yes.
I approached this list thinking I have all of time and space to make choices from. Then I realised I only have all of time and planet Earth to make choices from. And then I thought, well, there are actually limitations to that as well. And we'll talk about those. But to make my list, number 5, I've got the Irish Civil War.
Oh, wow.
Originally, I was thinking back through my own family tree and the potato famine. I thought, maybe I was thinking a little bit of Paul McGann and the Hanging Gale there. And I thought, okay, you could do that, but that's very bleak. But the Civil War, that's actually quite interesting. And Doctor Who has done a lot of English history. It's done a bit of Scottish history, but it doesn't really do Ireland. And Ireland is right there. And there's so much you could do in that 1920s setting. And maybe reflect for a bit of the 1930s setting that you had, Rob, and that the way that you can capture that really well and have it look good on screen. But I thought going next door to Ireland would be really, really useful.
Yeah, that'd be really good. That Michael Collins sort of vibe.
Yeah, and look, if we could get Liam Neeson to play Michael Collins again, that would be even better. Sadly, Alan Rickman is no longer with us and can't play De Valera. Number 4, this is our half a snap, Rob.
Okay.
You said you wanted to go back to convict-era Sydney. I want to go forward about 50 years and south about 600 kilometres and do the gold rush in Australia's colonial past.
Yeah.
This is, I think, and initially, I'm going to be honest here, Rob, I had the same inspiration you did. I was thinking of the show Dodger and thought, how good was that? It was Australian and we could do that. And then I thought, well, Sydney, everybody does Sydney. I mean, it's not that great. But Melbourne's right there, and we've got the gold rush. At the time of the gold rush, Melbourne was the richest city on the planet in those few years. And it also was the site of a lot of migration and a lot of ethnic and racial tension and a lot of adventure and a lot of sadness and a lot of excitement. That to me says RTD Doctor Who. You could get a story in there about something mysterious and dodgy and maybe alien involved happening on the Gold Rush fields or happening around the build up to the Eureka Stockade. But also, Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor can tell us a story of the racial prejudices and divisions that came in, particularly with the Chinese people who came in to prospect in the gold rush. I think that's really just great material for Doctor Who.
Yeah, that almost writes itself. Something weird is happening, blame it on the Chinese, but it's actually an alien or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that being done. Rob, you had a cliche pick at number 5. I'm having my cliche pick at number 3, and I'm just saying ancient Egypt.
Yeah, okay.
I don't care when, I don't care who, I don't care whether it's Nefertiti or Tutankhamun or Cleopatra or Tutmosis III or whatever. I actually don't care. I just want Doctor Who, Egypt, pharaohs, pyramids, all of that guff. I don't care what story you do. You can't fail with ancient Egypt, surely.
Yeah, I was going to ask the question, do you mean ancient Egyptians in terms of the ones who were there with the pyramids, or the ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids before the ancient Egyptians?
Yeah, look, I don't know and I don't care. Whatever story is going to work, I just want ancient Egypt. I think that's an obvious one for the show to do sometime.
Sure.
Going from the very general at number 3 down to the much more specific at number 2, I want Doctor Who to go back to London, 1553, and the reign of the Lady Jane Grey.
Oh, that wasn't very long.
No, so the 9-Day Queen, this poor girl who was just used by factions in the court to try to control the succession, to try to continue our Protestant succession, to try to keep the rightful heir of Henry VIII, Mary, off the throne when her half-brother Edward VI died. I think there's so much going on here. There's wonderful court intrigue. Obviously, that we know that the BBC could do a 1555 setting really, really well. But the characters you would have in there, you'd have Queen Mary, you'd have Lady Jane Grey, you'd have the Somersets, you'd have Princess Elizabeth somewhere in the background. All of that stuff going on. It's just got some really powerful characters, but also in a period where the show really runs on vibes and feels, the tragedy of what happens to Jane Grey, I think, is one that the Doctor could do really, really well. And it would be one to get a new audience introduced to that Doctor Who trope that when it does it well, it does it so well of, why can't we change history? Why can't we save this person?
Yeah.
So that was my number 2. Number 1, I'm going back to a little bit more general, and that is I would like Doctor Who to go to South America and do something with the Incas. I'm thinking Peru. I'm thinking Machu Picchu. I'm thinking the Nazca Lines. These are settings and periods and eras where, again, it almost sort of writes itself. Is it a bit of a prequel to Death to the Daleks? Do we get the Exelons involved, for example? Wouldn't that be kind of cool and fun? Or do we do a slightly more raw historical? Do we potentially do something with the conquistadors and the invasion of Peru and the colonization of that area? Or something very, very different? But when you just get the imagery of Machu Picchu and the Nazca Lines and the mystery, I think that's just a great Doctor Who setting. Plus, it was really important to me to get away from Europe for a couple of these picks. So we've been to Australia between us, we've been to Egypt, we've been to Macedonia, we're going to South America. So I think that's some important variety. So, Rob, they're our 2 lists.
Yeah, there's a couple of yours I really want to pick up on, and I'm trying to remember my Machu Picchu background. Did they leave it mysteriously in terms of they just up stumps one day and just left?
That's the working theory, I understand. And they said, right, well, we don't want this to fall to the conquistadors, so let's just all go away. Let's just pretend it's not there. Of course, 2 generations later, no one remembers it's there. And it wasn't until it was discovered that we knew it had just been lost, yeah.
Yeah, see, that's really interesting to me. I instantly think of a story where the Doctor has to defeat an enemy, but the way they defeat the enemy maybe makes the place uninhabitable for whatever reason. So the Doctor's like, okay, we've beaten this monster, guys, now we've all got to leave. And they all march down the hill and leave, and then the nature subsumes the
sorrowful place. Looks back, nature subsumes it, time passes,
Yeah.
You could see that. You could actually see that, can't you?
Yeah, you give the Doctor Who reason for why they left. Yeah. And the second one I wanted to pick up on was the Lady Jane one, because there was a mid-80s film where Helena Bonham Carter played Lady Jane.
In fact, it was called Lady Jane.
There you go. And I remember watching this. I got it out on VHS as, I don't know, about a 12 or 13-year-old, probably around 87, 88-ish. And I watched it, and I was very taken with the story, because obviously it's very sad with what happens to Lady Jane and all of that. And it was an aspect of history that I didn't really know. I mean, come on, I'm only 12, 13 at the time. I really didn't know a lot of history to begin with. But I felt that I knew a lot of things about history. And this was something that I just had no idea about. And it was like, this is a true story? Wow. But as I've gone through the decades and gotten older and pushing 50 now, I still find that's a story that a lot of people don't really know. If you put it to them, who was Lady Jane? Why is she famous? I don't think a lot of people would know.
And if they do, they go, oh, she was the 9-Day Queen. Okay, why? I don't know. She was just... They don't know more than that.
Yeah, and I think when you do put something like that into Doctor Who, it does that great Doctor Who thing of teaching people something and maybe encouraging people to go and open at least the Wikipedia and reading the entry and maybe clicking on some of the links in that and reading a few other things and getting a bit of a better picture. And that's always a brilliant thing. So I like that pick a lot.
Oh, thank you very much. I want to mention a couple that I thought about and ruled out.
Yeah.
I thought about something in World War II, and then I just thought, I think World War II is too big for Doctor Who. And particularly, I was sort of thinking about, the Holocaust and that sort of thing, and particularly, resonances to today. And I just thought, as much as I love Doctor Who and it's done some great topics really well, I think the Holocaust is too big for a kid show, for a family show. I just think you can't quite go there. I did think about sort of going a bit Life of Brian and doing something in the era of Christ. Going back to Judea in sort of 0 to 31 BC. But I just thought, done right, that could be really fun. But just in the internet era, is it just, would it be Life of Brian, Jesus Christ Superstar,
Red Dwarf?
By 20, sort of,
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be too good. And the other one that I was looking at, and I'm going to be very, very honest here, I was looking at trying to, again, get out of Europe and do sort of different sort of things. I thought the Zulu Wars and the Battle of Rorke's Drift and all that, or the Jamison Raid, those are some really interesting parts of history, very different parts of history. And then I just thought, do I want RTD telling that story? And my conclusion was no. I think RTD is very good at feelings and at broad brush statements, but anything with a bit of nuance, particularly history with nuance, and there is a lot of wickedness in the Zulu Wars. There's a lot of wickedness in the Zulu Wars, but there's also a lot of complexity as well. And I just thought, I don't want RTD doing that. And I think that, again, you start to tackle African colonialism, and the fighting on Twitter would just be horrible.
Oh, zip forward a couple of decades to the Boer War, or the Anglo-Boer War, as we should call it these days. And, I mean, that's where we get concentration camps from. That is a fact, but you could imagine RTD going down that rabbit hole and not showing the bigger picture. And yes, I can imagine Twitter, sadly. There are some topics which probably just can't be done properly on Doctor Who. They would just become too... Yeah, I don't even know the right word.
No, neither do I. And I think, but I think you've got the feeling that I'm trying to convey, and I think that is disappointing. That is a little bit sad. But I think it is right that sometimes there are topics that just aren't quite right for the show, and particularly the show in the era that it's in now. Yeah, I just think that was a point to make. But outside of that, I think we've got some really fun, interesting locations. Some of them have been done before or done in different ways. We've both, though, got Australian colonial era. We've both got some sort of, ancient Egypt, Alexander the Great type thing. We've both got stuff in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. So, yeah, look, we went in similar paths, but very different.
Yeah, the further you get from something, I think the more fun, for want of a better word, you can have with it. We can have fun with the people in Machu Picchu. We can have fun, again, if that's the right word, with the Lady Jane era and so on. But when it's something like World War II, where there are still people alive who fought in that war, Dave, that's tricky. I mean, maybe you can pull it down to some tiny little part of World War II, like it's a submarine base in some Scandinavian country and it's cut off from everyone else and some alien monster terrorizes it or something. But then is it really telling a World War II story, or is it just a base under siege where World War II is the backdrop,
That's exactly right. You're sort of like a Curse of Fenric, where it's just a backdrop. You're like the Stephen Moffat Series 1 Eccleston Empty Child. You're like the Empty Child, where okay, this is a very nice backdrop in which to have this story, but it's not really a World War II story.
That's it. Yeah.
So you can do that, absolutely. But Rob, look, with all of Earth's history to talk about, we have filled out our 20 minutes very nicely, and it fills very quickly.
Oh, I could talk history all night, Dave, as could you, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a passion for both of us. We both have bookshelves full of these topics. But I have drawn another topic for next month out of Turlo's Hat of Rassilon.
Okay.
This has come in from, I don't know if you call him a listener, Rob Irwin.
Really?
Who wrote in to say, you have done top 5 overrated stories. Can we do top 5 underrated stories?
This was a message from me to you when? Months ago?
Months ago, but it went in the hat. It's been pulled out. So thanks to sometime listener, sometime contributor, Rob Irwin. Next month, we will be doing a top 5 underrated stories. But until then, I've been Dave.
I've been Robin. I'm quite tickled by that, Dave. That's great.
We will speak again in a month.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
That was a genuine reaction there.